The classified documents scattered across the floor like autumn leaves. The sound of alarms blaring through Hangar 7. Sofia Chen, 29 and dressed in a pencil skirt with sensible heels, stood frozen before the flight simulator controls, her pulse racing against the countdown clock. Across the room, Air Force Colonel James Barrett glared, his voice slicing through the chaos like a combat knife. "I asked for a pilot, not someone who takes dictation. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." No one moved. No one spoke. The 6 pilots in the room suddenly found the floor fascinating. Nobody defended her. Nobody even looked her way. Commander Elaine Wright emerged from the Situation Room, sweat beading on her forehead despite the air conditioning. "Colonel Barrett, I apologize. Let me get Captain Reynolds to handle this personally. Your operation brief promised elite personnel." "I see desk jockeys and quota fillers," Barrett growled, his squadron of F-35 pilots forming an intimidating semicircle behind him. The words stung Sofia like shrapnel, not because they targeted her gender or her Chinese-American heritage, but because they assumed she was hired to fill diversity numbers rather than for merit. She had heard variations of this before, countless times over her 4 years at Pacific Air Command, but today something felt different. What they didn't know was that Sofia carried a secret that could change everything if she dared to reveal it. "I can run the simulation," Sofia said quietly. The room fell silent. She had never volunteered for anything beyond her administrative duties, never challenged the established hierarchy. Her voice, barely above a whisper, somehow carried more weight than Barrett's booming commands. Captain Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. Lieutenant Zhang studied his tactical tablet like it contained nuclear launch codes. Major Wilson gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles white. Ramirez, the squadron's tech specialist, stepped forward with theatrical disgust. "Look at this. She doesn't even know how to configure the simulator parameters. Probably learned about F-35s from watching Top Gun." Peterson, another pilot, laughed sharply. "My nephew plays with flight simulators too. Maybe they could have a playdate." Sofia's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the console. These weren't just any hands. Her fingernails, kept short by necessity, were immaculate, her skin smooth and unblemished. But she had learned to hide her strength, to appear less capable than reality demanded. Survival at Pacific Air Command required invisibility. "The atmospheric turbulence parameters are incorrect," she continued, her voice steady despite the mockery. "You're simulating stratocumulus conditions, but your pressure differentials are programmed for cirrus formations. That's why your pilots keep experiencing unrealistic yaw during cloud penetration." Colonel Barrett stopped mid-insult. That level of diagnostic precision required either extraordinary luck or genuine expertise. "She read that online," Ramirez insisted. "Anyone can memorize terminology." "Then let anyone fix it," Sofia replied, meeting Barrett's skeptical gaze. "But when your pilots crash during the field exercise because they've trained with incorrect atmospheric dynamics, remember you had the chance to prevent it." Commander Wright grabbed her arm, not roughly but firmly. Fear radiated from her rather than anger. She needed this joint exercise to succeed. Offending visiting F-35 squadron. Leaders meant career suicide for her small Pacific command base. "Sofia, return to your station now." She looked at her commander, seeing the desperation in her eyes, the same desperation that had driven her to accept this administrative position 4 years ago, when she had nowhere else to go and nothing left to lose. "Your simulation is already generating dangerous training data," she told Barrett directly. "You have maybe 30 minutes before your pilots internalize incorrect response patterns. Your choice." The simulator suddenly beeped a warning, flashing error codes that confirmed her diagnosis. Captain Reynolds whistled low. He had seen this issue before, always followed by failed training exercises. But admitting Sofia's expertise meant acknowledging 4 years of dismissing her contributions. As Sofia retreated to the cramped staff room, her hands shook. 4 years of silence. 4 years of accepting humiliation with grace. 4 years of pretending incompetence to avoid conflict. All of it was crashing down because she couldn't watch precision equipment suffer for human prejudice. Her phone buzzed with a message from Annapolis, a number she hadn't seen in years. She deleted it without reading, but the damage was done. Memories she had buried deep began clawing their way to the surface. Little did she know that the deleted message contained news that would change everything. In her locker, beneath worn administrative manuals and a travel mug that had seen better days, lay her personal tablet. Professional-grade simulation software filled the device, programs that cost more than her annual salary. She had brought them from Annapolis, unable to abandon tools that felt like extensions of her soul. Wrapped in microfiber cloth was a photograph. Her father standing beside her at graduation, pride radiating from every angle, his handwriting on the back still legible despite years of handling. "My daughter, never let anyone define who you are. Talent speaks louder than words." Outside, she heard the simulator struggling. Barrett shouting orders while Reynolds and Zhang fumbled with settings they didn't understand. The warning sounds grew worse, electronic systems straining against inevitable failure. Sofia closed the locker, photograph still in her hand. Her father wouldn't recognize the woman she had become, hiding talent to avoid conflict, accepting disrespect to maintain peace. But perhaps it wasn't too late. Perhaps dignity could be reclaimed, not through confrontation, but through undeniable demonstration. The simulator coughed another error code, the death rattle of precision technology murdered by ignorance. Sofia made her decision. 3 days later, the tension in Pacific Air Command had thickened like storm clouds before a typhoon. Sofia arrived early as always, but found the control center buzzing with an energy that made her stomach clench. Word had spread about the simulator incident, and not in her favor. "Morning, Sof," Captain Reynolds called out, but his usual friendly tone carried an edge. Lieutenant Zhang nodded tersely from behind the communications console. Only Major Wilson offered his customary warm smile, though even he seemed more cautious than usual. Commander Wright emerged from her office, clipboard in hand, her expression unreadable. "Sofia, we need to talk." Her heart sank. The private conversation she had been dreading was finally here. "Look," Commander Wright began once they were alone in her cramped office, surrounded by mission reports and faded military photographs. "That thing with Colonel Barrett's squadron. It's got people talking." "What kind of questions?" Sofia asked, though she already knew. "About whether we're running a professional operation or some kind of—" She paused, searching for diplomatic words. "Training program for inexperienced administrative staff." The words stung because they were so far from the truth. Sofia had been flying since she could reach the controls, had earned her aeronautical engineering degree with honors from the Naval Academy, had once led a team of test pilots for experimental aircraft. But here at Pacific Air Command, her resume began and ended with filing reports and scheduling meetings. "I fixed their simulation," she said quietly. "The data now matches actual flight conditions." "That's not the point." Wright's voice carried a frustration that wasn't entirely directed at her. "This is a high-security operation, Sofia. People talk." General Henderson heard from his aide, who was briefed by Barrett's team, that you supposedly embarrassed some F-35 pilots, made them look foolish. "I did my job." "Your job is what I say it is." The words came out harsher than Wright intended. She softened slightly, but the damage was done. "Look, I like you. You're reliable, punctual, and you don't cause trouble. But I've got a command to run." The joint exercises alone keep this base relevant in Pentagon budget discussions. Sofia understood the unspoken message: stay invisible or find another position. In the Pacific Command structure, there weren't many options for a woman whose security clearance had been mysteriously downgraded 4 years ago. "I understand," she said, though the words tasted like metal in her mouth. "Good. I'm glad we're on the same page." Wright stood, signaling the conversation was over. "Oh, and Sofia, Colonel Barrett is bringing his squadron back this afternoon for the final simulation calibration. I want Reynolds handling it personally." As Sofia returned to the control center floor, she caught fragments of conversation that stopped abruptly when she appeared. Words like show off and overstepping floated through the air like poison gas. She had heard them before, in different contexts, in different bases, but they always carried the same message: know your place. Major Wilson approached her station as she began organizing the day's mission briefings. "You okay, Chun?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. Wilson was the only one who had ever addressed her by her family name, the only one who seemed to see past the surface assumptions that defined her in this place. "That was impressive the other day," he said quietly, glancing around to make sure they weren't overheard. "I've been working with simulators for 12 years, and I've never seen anyone diagnose an atmospheric modeling error that fast. Just lucky," Sofia deflected, but Wilson shook his head. "Nah, that wasn't luck. That was skill, real skill." He paused, studying her face. "Where did you learn to work like that?" The question hung in the air between them. Sofia had been waiting 4 years for someone to ask, to show genuine curiosity about her background. But now that the moment had arrived, she found herself paralyzed by the weight of explanation. "Around," she said finally. "You pick things up." Wilson nodded, accepting her evasion with grace. "Well, whoever taught you knew what they were doing. That simulator was running like a dream when I checked it this morning." As if summoned by their conversation, the sound of security doors opening filled the control center. Through the reinforced glass, Sofia saw Colonel Barrett striding across the tarmac, his squadron following in formation. Her stomach tightened as she recognized the set of his shoulders, the aggressive swagger that had intimidated her before. "Reynolds," Commander Wright called out, but her voice cracked with nervous energy. "Your VIP is here." Barrett strode into the control center like he owned it, his gaze sweeping over the various workstations before settling on Sofia. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and she saw something there that hadn't been present during their first encounter: uncertainty. "Commander Wright," Barrett said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I need to speak with whoever modified our simulation parameters." "That would be Captain Reynolds," Wright replied quickly, gesturing toward the senior officer. "He's our most experienced." "No." Barrett's interruption was sharp. "I need to speak with her." He pointed directly at Sofia, the woman who made the diagnosis. The control center fell silent again, but this time the quiet felt different, expectant, dangerous. Sofia set down her tablet and walked toward the group, her heart pounding but her step steady. She had learned long ago that showing fear only invited more predators. "You wanted to see me?" she asked, her voice calm despite the chaos in her chest. Barrett studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "My squadron's been running simulations for 3 days now. Smooth as silk, better performance metrics than we've seen in months." "Good," Sofia replied, unsure where this was leading. "The thing is," Barrett continued, "I've been thinking about what you said about the atmospheric turbulence parameters, about the pressure differentials." He paused. "That's not common knowledge, that's specialized information." Sofia remained silent, waiting, so I made some calls. "Talked to some people." Barrett's voice grew quieter, more intense. "People who know about advanced flight dynamics, military specifications. The kind of technology that's not exactly available to your average administrative assistant. The blood drained from Sofia's face. She had been so focused on fixing the simulator that she hadn't considered the implications of revealing her knowledge. In her old life, such expertise would have been expected, even celebrated. Here, it made her a threat. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but even to her own ears, the denial sounded weak. Barrett smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We'll see about that." What Barrett had discovered would shatter the carefully constructed life Sofia had built and force her to confront a past she'd tried desperately to escape. As the pilots left the control center, Sofia felt the weight of every stare, every whispered conversation, every sideways glance. She had tried so hard to remain invisible, to blend into the background of Pacific Air Command's operational landscape, but now, like it or not, she was very much visible. And visibility, she knew from bitter experience, was the first step toward destruction. The following week brought monsoon rains that seemed to mirror Sofia's darkening mood. She arrived at the base each morning to find the atmosphere growing increasingly hostile. Officers who had once nodded politely now avoided eye contact. Her fellow staffers' conversations died when she entered the break room. Even the maintenance crews treated her with newfound suspicion. Commander Wright called her into her office on Thursday afternoon, her face grave. "I've got a problem, Sofia," she began without preamble. "A big one." She sat in the worn chair, across from her commander's desk, noting how Wright couldn't quite meet her eyes. "Colonel Barrett has been asking questions about you. About your background. About where you learned to work on military-grade simulation systems." Wright's voice carried a tremor Sofia had never heard before. "He's got people looking into your history." Sofia's mouth went dry. "What kind of people?" "The kind that don't take mind-your-own-business for an answer." Wright finally looked at her directly. "Sofia, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. Is there anything in your past that could hurt this command? Anything at all?" The question hung between them like a loaded weapon. Sofia thought about her life before Pacific Command, the test flights, the classified projects, the security breach that had destroyed everything she'd built, the non-disclosure agreements she'd signed, the settlement that had bought her silence in exchange for a chance to disappear. "Everyone has a past, Commander. That's not an answer." Wright's voice hardened. "I've got 3 fighter squadrons under my command and responsibility for the security of an entire sector. This base is all I have." "I'm not hiding anything illegal," Sofia interrupted. "I've never been arrested, never been charged with anything. I pass my security screenings and do my job." But she sighed, knowing that partial truth was better than outright lies. "I used to work for the Naval Air Systems Command. It didn't end well. I came here for a fresh start." Wright leaned back in her chair, processing this information. "What kind of work?" "Flight testing, systems evaluation. The kind of work that doesn't exist at a forward Pacific base." "Jesus, Sofia." Wright rubbed her temples. "Why didn't you tell me this before? Why take a job as a basic administrative assistant when you could have been flying aircraft?" "Because sometimes you need to disappear. Sometimes starting over means starting at the bottom." Before Wright could respond, the base alarm system activated. Through the office window, Sofia saw a black SUV pull into the restricted area, its government plates clearly visible. 2 men in dark suits emerged, their movements precise and professional. Military intelligence, she realized with a sinking heart. Or worse, Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Commander Wright, the taller of the 2 men, approached the office. "I'm Agent Donovan, Defense Intelligence Agency. This is Agent Park. We'd like to speak with one of your personnel." Sofia closed her eyes, knowing that her carefully constructed anonymity was about to crumble. "Which personnel?" Wright asked, though her glance towards Sofia made the answer obvious. "Sofia Chen." We understand she recently demonstrated unusual technical knowledge regarding F-35 simulation parameters. The secret Sofia had protected for 4 years was about to explode into the open, and with it, the truth about who she really was. The next hour unfolded like a slow-motion crash landing. The agents were polite but thorough, asking questions about her qualifications, her diagnostic methods, her knowledge of military specifications. Sofia answered carefully, sticking to facts while revealing as little as possible about her former life. "Miss Chen," Agent Donovan said finally, "our preliminary investigation suggests you have expertise that's unusual for someone in your current position. We're not accusing you of anything, but we need to understand how a base secretary knows classified information about F-35 flight dynamics." "I don't know any classified information," Sofia replied honestly. "I diagnosed a common problem using publicly available technical knowledge. The atmospheric turbulence modeling issue you identified isn't common knowledge," Agent Park interjected. "It's a known vulnerability in that particular simulation system, but it's not something that would be obvious to most administrative personnel." Sofia felt trapped. Admitting her true background would invite scrutiny she couldn't afford, but continuing to deny her expertise would only make her look more suspicious. "I read a lot," she said lamely. "Technical manuals, engineering journals. I stay current." With aviation technology, the agents exchanged glances. Agent Donovan pulled out a tablet, scrolling through what appeared to be a lengthy document. "According to our records, Sofia Chen has been employed at Pacific Air Command for 4 years. Before that, there's very little documentation of your existence. No employment history, no credit records, no significant digital footprint. That's unusual in today's world." Sofia's heart hammered against her ribs. She had been so careful to build her new identity slowly, paying cash for everything, avoiding the kind of paper trail that would connect her to her former life. But apparently, that very caution had made her suspicious. "I value my privacy," she said. "Privacy is one thing," Agent Park replied. "But this level of anonymity requires significant effort, almost like someone was trying to hide from something." Wright looked back and forth between Sofia and the agents, her face pale. "Gentlemen, I can vouch for Sofia. She's been a model employee." As the agents gathered their materials, Wright turned to Sofia with a mixture of awe and regret. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I should have recognized your talent." "You gave me work when I needed it," Sofia interrupted. "You gave me a place to heal. That's not something to apologize for." "What happens now? To the command center, I mean." Sofia smiled, the first genuine smile she'd worn in days. "Now you hire better technical officers. You promote Wilson to senior operations manager. He's got excellent instincts. And you remember that talent comes in all forms, not just the ones you expect." As they left the briefing room, Sofia felt the weight of 4 years of secrecy lifting from her shoulders. The truth was finally out, and she was still standing. More than that, she was ready to soar. The drive back to the command center was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Wright seemed lost in thought, probably reconsidering every assumption she'd made about her personnel. Sofia watched the familiar landscape of the base roll past, knowing that everything had changed in the span of a few hours. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "LTCMDR. Chun, this is Colonel Barrett. Heard the news. Outstanding work on the simulator. Hope you'll consider the Pentagon position. The country needs officers who can think under fire. Semper Fi." Sofia smiled, tucking the phone away. For the first time in 4 years, her future felt wide open with possibilities. The question now wasn't whether she was qualified for the opportunities being offered. It was which one would let her make the biggest difference. The news spread through Pacific Air Command like wildfire within hours of the DIA agent's visit. Everyone on base knew that the quiet secretary in the operations Center was actually a renowned test pilot who had been living in hiding. The story had everything military personnel loved: mystery, government intrigue, and the dramatic revelation that the woman they'd all underestimated was actually a genius. Sofia arrived at work the next morning to find a crowd gathered outside the command center. Military press officers occupied the briefing area, their communications equipment set up like an impromptu media center. Junior officers thrust questions at her as she tried to reach her workstation. Lieutenant Commander Chen, how does it feel to be vindicated after 4 years? Will you be returning to Annapolis? What can you tell us about the neural flight system you developed? Sofia pushed through the crowd without comment, but inside the command center, she found even more chaos. The secure line rang incessantly, with calls from Pentagon officials, recruitment officers, and former colleagues. Captain Reynolds and Lieutenant Zhang stood near the coffee station, their faces mixing curiosity with something that looked like shame. "Morning, Commander Chen," Reynolds said awkwardly, emphasizing her former rank. "It's still Sofia," she replied, setting down her bag. "Nothing's changed." "Everything's changed," John muttered. "We've been working next to a flight systems pioneer for 4 years and didn't know it." Wilson approached with a cup of coffee and a gentle smile. "How are you holding up, Chen?" "Better than expected," Sofia admitted, "though I could do without the media circus." Commander Wright emerged from her office looking haggard. "Sofia, I've had 23 calls this morning. 5 from Joint Chief Staff, 8 from news outlets, and 10 from squadron leaders wanting to know if we're taking applications for administrative positions. I'm sorry about the disruption. Don't apologize. I should be apologizing to you." Wright's voice carried genuine remorse. "I've been thinking all night about how we treated you, how I treated you, making you file reports and schedule meetings, when you could have been—" "Right, stop." Sofia's voice was firm, but kind. "I needed those 4 years. I needed to remember that there's dignity in all work, that my value as a person wasn't tied to my professional reputation. Working here taught me that." Before Wright could respond, the security door chimed. A woman in immaculate naval dress uniform entered, her commander's insignia gleaming, her posture radiating authority. Sofia recognized her immediately: Commander Diane Lawrence, Director of the Naval Aviation Development Program. "Lieutenant." "Commander Chen," Lawrence said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I've been trying to reach you." The command center fell silent. Even the press officers outside seemed to sense the importance of this moment. "Commander Lawrence," Sofia's voice was carefully neutral, "I wasn't expecting you. I flew in as soon as I heard the news. We need to talk. I'm working right now." "This is more important than—" Lawrence paused, looking around the command center with barely concealed disdain. "This is more important than whatever you're doing here." The condescension in her tone was unmistakable. Sofia felt her colleagues stiffen, their eyes fixed on this exchange between 2 very different worlds. "My work is important," Sofia said quietly. "All honest work is important." Lawrence's expression softened slightly, as if she were dealing with a child having a tantrum. "Of course it is. But you're brilliant, Sofia. You belong in advanced research and development, not in some remote Pacific command center. 4 years ago, your department told me I belonged in a security hearing, facing charges of negligence. Now suddenly I belong in R&D again? That was different. We were misled by Kincaid's evidence, but now we know the truth." "You knew the truth then," Sofia replied, her voice growing stronger. "You just chose to believe the version that was more convenient for you." Lawrence's mask slipped, revealing the calculating officer beneath. "Sofia, be reasonable. We're prepared to offer you full reinstatement, your old rank plus promotion to commander, and complete autonomy over your projects. You'd have your own laboratory, unlimited research budget, and a team of the best engineers in the service." "And in exchange?" In exchange, you come home where you belong. You stop this, whatever this is." Lawrence gestured around the command center dismissively. "You resume your rightful place in the aviation community." Sofia looked around the command center at Wright, who had given her work when she was desperate. At Wilson, who had treated her with respect from day one. At Reynolds and Zhang, who were finally beginning to understand what they'd witnessed. At the familiar equipment and systems that had been her companions through the darkest period of her life. "This is my home," she said simply. "These are my people." Lawrence's smile became strained. "Sofia, I understand you're emotional about this situation. It's natural to feel some loyalty to the place that sheltered you. But let's be practical. What future do you have here? What innovations can you create? What problems can you solve?" "I can teach," Sofia said, the words coming to her as she spoke them. "I can train the next generation of pilots to think like engineers. I can bridge the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical application." "You want to waste your talents on aviation education?" Lawrence's voice rose with incredulity. "I want to use my talents to make a difference. Real difference, not just military advancement." Lawrence's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake, Sofia. The aviation community has a long memory. If you turn down this opportunity, there might not be another one. Is that a threat?" "It's reality. The military world is smaller than you think. Reputation matters." Sofia felt a familiar chill, the same intimidation tactics that had been used against her 4 years ago. But this time, she wasn't alone. This time, she had people who believed in her worth beyond her ability to generate patents and military advantages. "My reputation is my own to build," Sofia said. "And I choose to build it on integrity, not on bowing to institutional pressure." Wilson stepped forward, his voice steady. "The lady said no. Maybe it's time you left." Lawrence looked at him with undisguised contempt. "I wasn't speaking to you. You're in our command center, disrespecting our colleague," Wilson replied. "That makes it my business." Reynolds and Zhang moved closer, their solidarity surprising. Even themselves. Wright straightened behind the console, her face resolute. "I think," Wright said quietly, "you should leave, Commander Lawrence. Sofia's made her position clear." Lawrence's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. She wasn't accustomed to being dismissed by people she considered beneath her station. "This is a mistake, Sofia. A career-ending mistake." "Then it's my mistake to make," Sofia replied calmly. As Lawrence turned to leave, she paused at the V door. "The Pentagon offer won't last forever either. They want results, not sentiment. When you're ready to be realistic about your future, you know where to find me." The door slammed behind her, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Through the windows, they watched Lawrence stride past the press officers without comment, her posture rigid with fury. "Well," Reynolds said finally, "that was something. You okay?" Wilson asked Sofia, concern evident in his voice. Sofia looked around at the faces surrounding her, not colleagues, she realized, but friends. People who had stood up for her when it mattered, who had chosen loyalty over opportunity. "I'm perfect," she said, and for the first time in years, she meant it completely. The secure line rang again, jarring everyone back to reality. Wright answered with a weary sigh. "Pacific Air Command operations. Yes, she's here." "No, she's not giving interviews." "Because she's working, that's why." As Wright fielded another reporter's call, Sofia's phone buzzed with a text from Agent Donovan. "Pentagon meeting scheduled for Monday if you're interested. No pressure, but the offer stands. Your choice entirely." Sofia stared at the message, weighing her options. The Pentagon represented everything she'd once dreamed of: prestigious work, unlimited resources, the chance to shape the future of military aviation. It was the career she'd lost, offered back to her on a silver platter. But as she looked around the command center, she realized that her dreams had evolved. 4 years ago, Success meant recognition, awards, and cutting-edge research. Now success meant something different entirely. "Wilson," she said suddenly, "how would you feel about going back to school?" He looked puzzled. "What kind of school?" "Aeronautical engineering. Part-time while you work. I could help you with the coursework." Wilson's eyes widened. "You think I could do that?" "I think you have natural instincts that can't be taught. The rest is just mathematics and physics. We can handle that." "What about Reynolds and Zhang?" Wilson asked. "They've got experience too." Sofia looked at the two officers who were listening with growing interest. "Anyone who wants to learn. We could start a training program here, combine hands-on experience with engineering theory." Wright hung up the phone, her expression thoughtful. "You're talking about turning this command center into some kind of training facility." "I'm talking about creating something new. A place where theoretical knowledge meets practical application. Where people learn to think like test pilots, while working like operational officers." "And you'd give up the Pentagon for this?" Wright asked, incredulous. Sofia considered the question carefully. "The Pentagon has thousands of brilliant officers. They'll solve their problems with or without me. But here I could make a difference that lasts generations." Her phone rang, another unfamiliar number. She answered reluctantly. "Lieutenant Commander Chen, this is General Amanda Hayes, Pentagon Aviation Division. I wanted to discuss the position we've offered." "General Hayes, I'm honored by the offer, but before you decide, let me explain what we're proposing. We don't want you chained to a desk in Washington. We need field officers, people who can work with their hands and solve problems in real-world conditions. The position would involve training military pilots, developing field-portable diagnostic equipment, and bridging the gap between complex technology and practical operations." Sofia felt her heart skip. This wasn't the laboratory position she'd expected. This was something entirely different. "You'd be based wherever you think you can do the most good," General Hayes continued. "If you want to work out of a command center in the Pacific while developing training programs for military pilots, that works for us. We need innovation, not bureaucracy." The offer hung in the air like a bridge between her old life and her new one. Sofia looked around the command center again, seeing possibilities she hadn't considered before. "Could I bring a team?" she asked. "Local officers who understand both the practical and theoretical sides. If they can pass security clearance, absolutely. We believe diverse teams produce better solutions." Sofia met Wilson's eyes, seeing excitement and hope there. She looked at Reynolds and Zhang, who were following the conversation with growing interest. Finally, she looked at Wright, who was beginning to smile as she understood what Sofia was considering. "General Hayes," Sofia said slowly, "I think we might be able to work something out." 2 weeks later, Pacific Air Command operations had transformed into something unprecedented in the base's history. Pentagon engineers had arrived to assess the facility's potential as a training center, while press officers continued to document Sofia's unconventional choice to remain at the remote Pacific base. The most dramatic change was Wilson's enrollment in an accelerated engineering program. Sofia had spent countless hours helping him navigate calculus and physics, watching his natural mechanical intuition flourish when supported by theoretical knowledge. His progress astonished even the university professors who reviewed his work. "I never thought I was smart enough for this," Wilson confided during one of their late-night study sessions. "Intelligence isn't about what you thought you couldn't do," Sofia replied. "It's about what you discover you can do when someone believes in you." Reynolds and Zhang had also signed up for the program, though their progress was slower. Reynolds struggled with mathematics but excelled at systems thinking. Zhang had an intuitive grasp of material science that impressed Sofia's Pentagon contacts. Both officers approached their studies with the determination of people who had been given a second chance at dreams they'd never dared to pursue. The transformation wasn't limited to education. Word of Sofia's expertise had spread throughout the military community, bringing a steady stream of complex technical problems to the command center. Aircraft arrived from bases across the Pacific region, their issues ranging from simple maintenance to sophisticated diagnostic challenges that would have stumped most operational units. Colonel Barrett had become a regular visitor, bringing increasingly challenging projects and spreading word about the command center's capabilities among his F-35 squadron contacts. His initial skepticism had evolved into genuine respect, and he often stayed to observe Sofia's diagnostic methods. "I've never seen anyone approach aviation problems the way you do," he told her one afternoon while watching her work on a flight control system. "You think 3 steps ahead of the problem." "Engineering is just applied problem solving," Sofia replied, adjusting a sensor array with microscopic precision. "The secret is understanding that every problem has multiple solutions. You just have to find the elegant one." But not everyone in the military community welcomed the changes. Some high-ranking officers resented the shift in resources and attention. Others questioned whether Sofia's presence was good for the traditional command structure. The tension came to a head during a regional command meeting where several base commanders voiced their concerns. "This used to be a standard operations center," complained Captain Henderson from Naval Station Pearl Harbor. "Now we've got civilian engineers and Pentagon officials everywhere. It's disrupting our chain of command. It's also bringing innovation into our region," countered Admiral Wilson, the Pacific Fleet commander. "Technical problems that used to ground aircraft for weeks are being solved in days. Our readiness metrics are at an all-time high." "Innovation isn't everything," Henderson shot back. "Some of us value traditional structure over experimentation." Sofia had attended the meeting at Admiral Wilson's request, though she'd tried to avoid the spotlight. When called upon to address the concerns, she stood slowly, feeling the weight of dozens of gazes. "I understand the disruption my presence has caused," she began. "That was never my intention. I came here 4 years ago looking for anonymity, and I found something much more valuable. I found a community that accepted me without knowing my credentials." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "The attention will die down eventually. Reporters will move on to other stories, and the Pentagon will establish its training protocols. But what we're building here, the combination of practical skills and theoretical knowledge that will last." "What exactly are you building?" asked Commander Bradley, a submarine warfare officer. "Opportunity," Sofia replied. "Wilson will graduate next year with an aeronautical engineering degree, while maintaining his operational duties and supporting his family. Reynolds is discovering talents he never knew he had. John is learning that intelligence comes in many forms." She looked around the room, making eye contact with skeptics and supporters alike. 4 years ago, I thought my career was over. This community gave me a chance to rebuild my life. Now I want to give others the same opportunity, the chance to discover what they're capable of when someone believes in them." An elderly admiral in the back row raised his hand. "What happens when the Pentagon gets tired of this experiment? What happens to all these fancy programs when you move on to bigger things?" The question struck at Sofia's deepest fears. She had built her new life around stability and community, but her growing responsibilities threatened to pull her back into the world of military politics and competing priorities. "That's why we're building something sustainable," she said. "The training program will continue with or without me. The diagnostic protocols we're developing will become standard procedure, and the people we're educating will carry this knowledge forward long after I'm gone." After the meeting, Sofia walked through the base, reflecting on how much had changed since that first encounter with Colonel Barrett. The facility still maintained its military character, but it now hummed with new energy and purpose. Her phone buzzed with a message from Admiral Westfield, her former mentor, Kincaid's sentenced to 15 years. Dishonorable discharge. Your vindication is complete. Sofia stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. The vindication felt hollow compared to the satisfaction of watching Wilson master differential equations, or seeing Reynolds' confidence grow as he tackled increasingly complex repairs. Sofia gestured toward the audience where dozens of military personnel had gathered to support the program. Look around this room, Senator. These are the faces of America's hidden potential. These are the people who will solve tomorrow's problems if we give them today's opportunities. Every dollar invested in their education and training returns tenfold in innovation, service, and national security. The silence stretched as Hartley seemed to struggle for a response. Finally, he managed. That's very inspiring, Lieutenant. Commander Chun, but inspiration doesn't justify taxpayer expenditure, doesn't it? Sofia asked quietly. When inspiration produces innovation that saves lives and money, when it transforms underutilized personnel into highly skilled engineers, when it proves that America's greatest resource isn't our technology or our hardware, it's our people. She walked closer to Hartley's table, her presence commanding the room's attention. You want to know about waste, Senator. Waste is having brilliant minds shuffling papers for 20 years because nobody recognized their potential. Waste is losing air superiority because our equipment fails and we don't have enough skilled people to fix it. Waste is building walls between operational and research communities instead of bridges that make us all stronger. Sofia returned to her seat, but her voice carried clearly through the silent briefing room. This program doesn't waste taxpayer money, it multiplies. Eat. Every dollar invested here produces engineers, innovations, and capabilities that didn't exist before. More importantly, it produces service members who understand that their value isn't determined by their starting point, but by their willingness to grow. The hearing continued for another hour, but the tone had shifted completely. Hartley's questions became increasingly defensive while Sofia's supporters provided testimony about the program's impact. Military officials presented data showing cost savings and efficiency improvements. Base commanders spoke about increased operational readiness and improved morale. When the hearing concluded, Sofia felt cautiously optimistic. She had defended her work honestly and thoroughly, but political decisions weren't always based on facts or logic. That evening, as she organized reports in the quiet command center, her phone rang with a call from General Hayes. Sofia, I wanted you to hear this directly from me. Senator Hartley just announced that he's withdrawing his opposition to the program. More than that, he's requesting additional funding to expand it to other commands. Sofia sank into a chair, overwhelmed by relief and exhaustion. What changed his mind? According to his staff, he spent the afternoon talking to Wilson, Reynolds, and Zhang, apparently hearing their stories directly, not filtered through political rhetoric, made him understand what you've actually accomplished here. As Sofia ended the call, she looked around the command center that had become so much more than a workplace. It was a symbol of second chances, a proving ground for hidden potential, and a bridge between worlds that had once seemed incompatible. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new students, and new opportunities to prove that talent could flourish anywhere if given the right support. But tonight, she was content to savor a victory that had been won not through political maneuvering or institutional influence, but through the simple power of transformed lives and realized dreams. The final test hadn't been about defending a program. It had been about defending the belief that everyone deserved a chance to discover what they were capable of achieving. And that belief, Sofia now knew, was worth fighting for. 1 month later, as Sofia was reviewing simulation data in her office, the base alert system suddenly activated, bathing the command center in pulsing red light. The emergency klaxon wailed its unmistakable warning. All personnel, this is not a drill. Hostile aircraft approaching from Vector 270. Repeat, this is not a drill. Sofia rushed to the main operations floor where Commander Wright was already coordinating the response. "Status report?" Sofia asked, sliding into her station. 6 unidentified aircraft, 100 miles out and closing fast, Wright responded, her voice tight with tension. "They're not responding to communication attempts and are on direct approach to Kwajalein Atoll." Sofia's mind raced. Kwajalein housed one of America's most sensitive missile defense installations. Any attack there would have catastrophic implications. "Our closest response team?" she asked. 2 F-35s on patrol near Guam, but they're 40 minutes out at best. Reynolds reported from the tactical station. "The carrier group is repositioning, but their fighters won't arrive in time." "What about our assets here?" Sofia scanned the deployment board. "We have 1 F-35 on the tarmac," Zhang replied. "It was delivered this morning for diagnostic evaluation. The neural interface system is showing the same anomalies Barrett reported last week." "Is it flight capable?" Sofia asked. "Technically yes, but the interface issues make it dangerous to fly." Barrett's pilot reported severe disorientation during atmospheric transitions. Sofia's eyes met Wright's across the command center. They both knew what was at stake. 6 hostile aircraft approaching the critical defense installation. No response team available. 1 malfunctioning F-35 sitting on their tarmac. "I can fly it," Sofia said quietly. The command center fell silent. "That's not possible," Wright replied. "You haven't been cleared for active flight duty. Your reinstatement is still pending Pentagon approval." "I designed the neural interface system," Sofia countered. "I know exactly what's causing the disorientation, effect, and how to compensate for it manually." "It's too dangerous," Wilson protested. "The system failures could be catastrophic at combat speeds." Sofia met his gaze steadily. "If those aircraft reach Kwajalein, the consequences will be worse than catastrophic." Wright hesitated, weighing impossible alternatives. "Even if I authorize this, you haven't flown combat missions in over 4 years." "I've flown every day," Sofia replied. "In here," she tapped her temple, "and in the simulator. My muscle memory is intact." The radar pinged ominously. The hostile aircraft had accelerated. "They've increased speed," Reynolds reported. "Estimated time to Kwajalein perimeter is 18 minutes. Wright made her decision. "Prepare the F-35, Lieutenant Commander Chen. Has temporary flight authorization under emergency protocols." The next 3 minutes passed in a blur of activity. Sofia sprinted to the ready room where she donned a flight suit while Wilson and Zhang prepared the aircraft. Reynolds coordinated with Pacific Command, informing them of the desperate countermeasure being implemented. As Sofia ran toward the waiting F-35, Wright caught up with her on the tarmac. "This is insane," Wright said, helping her with the final helmet connections. "You know that, right?" "Sometimes insanity is the only rational response," Sofia replied. Checking the neural interface connections. "The system failures. I'll handle them." Sofia looked her commander in the eye. "This is what I was trained for, Wright." "This is who I am," Wright nodded, stepping back. "Godspeed, Lieutenant Commander." Climbing into the cockpit felt like coming home. Sofia's hands moved across the controls with practiced precision, muscle memory overriding the years of absence. The neural interface helmet settled around her head, connecting her directly to the aircraft systems. "Command, this is Phoenix. Pre-flight check complete. Requesting immediate clearance." "Phoenix, you are cleared for emergency takeoff on runway 1. Wind is 15 knots from the west. You are authorized for maximum performance climb." Sofia felt the F-35's awesome power surge as the engines ignited. The aircraft trembled with barely contained energy. "Phoenix launching," she reported, releasing the brakes. The F-35 rocketed down the runway, accelerating with breathtaking speed. Sofia felt the familiar pressure as the fighter leapt into the air climbing at a steep angle toward the approaching threat. Almost immediately, the neural interface flickered, sending a disorienting surge through her visual field. The horizon tilted impossibly, creating the sensation that the aircraft was rolling when it wasn't. "Phoenix experiencing interface anomalies," she reported calmly, switching to manual override protocols. Her fingers danced across the control panel, bypassing the automated systems one by one. This was the flaw Barrett's pilots had encountered. The neural interface created phantom sensory inputs during rapid altitude changes. But unlike those pilots, Sofia understood the system architecture intimately. She had designed it. "Command, I've stabilized the primary interface, continuing to intercept coordinates. Phoenix, be advised, hostiles have launched decoy countermeasures. Radar tracking is degraded." Sofia pushed the F-35 to supersonic speed, feeling the airframe shudder as it punched through the sound barrier. The neural interface flickered again, this time affecting the targeting system. "Phoenix, this is Wilson. I'm transmitting a bypass. Sequence to your secondary computer. It should stabilize the targeting array. Received, implementing now." As the code sequence loaded, Sofia caught her first visual of the approaching aircraft's sleek, unmarked fighters flying in tight formation. Military, but without identifying markings. The kind of aircraft used for deniable operations when nations wanted to strike without claiming responsibility. "Command, I have visual confirmation. 6 fifth-generation fighters, no markings. They're carrying air-to-ground ordnance. This is definitely a strike package. Phoenix, you are authorized to engage. Protect Quailine at all costs." Sofia armed her weapon systems, knowing she faced impossible odds. One F-35, however advanced, against 6 enemy fighters was a suicide mission. But she had one advantage: they couldn't anticipate intimate knowledge of aerial combat dynamics that went beyond standard training. "Command, I'm implementing Artemis Protocol 7. There was a pause before Wright's voice came through, confused. "Phoenix, we have no record of that protocol. That's because I developed it during the original Artemis trials. It was never formally adopted." Sofia banked the F-35 hard, climbing rapidly to 50,000 feet. The hostile formation tracked her movement, 2 fighters breaking off to pursue while the others continued toward Quailine. "They're splitting their formation," she reported. 2 on me, 4 continuing to target." The neural interface surged, again momentarily blinding her right visual field. Sofia compensated instantly, relying on her other instruments. "Phoenix, your neural patterns are showing extreme stress. The interface might collapse completely." "Acknowledged," Sofia replied, executing a complex rolling maneuver that the pursuing fighters struggled to match. "But if it does, I have a backup plan." The F-35's advanced systems allowed her to track all 6 hostile aircraft simultaneously. The 4 continuing toward Quailine were now within missile range of the installation. The 2 pursuing her were closing fast, preparing to fire. It was time for Artemis Protocol 7. Sofia cut her engines abruptly, deploying air brakes in a maneuver that defied conventional aerial tactics. The F-35 seemed to hang in the air momentarily, its momentum carrying it forward while its speed dropped precipitously. The pursuing fighters, unprepared for the suicidal maneuver, overshot her position. In that split-second advantage, Sofia reignited her engines and locked missiles on both pursuers. 2 quick launches, 2 direct hits. "Command, 2 hostiles. Neutralized. Engaging the remaining 4. But the neural interface had taken severe damage from the high-G maneuver. Warning indicators flashed across her display as the connection between her brain and the aircraft systems began to fail. "Phoenix, your neural patterns are destabilizing. System failure imminent." Sofia felt the disorientation intensify as the interface degraded further. The horizon seemed to tilt and spin, making conventional flight nearly impossible. But she had prepared for this contingency. Command, implementing final override. Disconnecting neural interface completely. Phoenix, that will disable half your flight systems. You can't. Sofia pulled the emergency disconnect, severing the neural link. Instantly, the advanced displays went dark, leaving her with only basic flight instruments. The F-35 was now just a very fast aircraft with missiles, stripped of its technological advantages. But sometimes, Sofia knew, the human element made the difference. With the 4 remaining hostile aircraft now focusing their attention on her, Sofia executed a series of maneuvers that no flight computer would have attempted. High-risk, high-reward. Tactics that relied on instinct and experience rather than algorithms. Command, I need a targeting solution for the hostiles. My advanced systems are offline. Working on it, Phoenix. Stand by. Sofia danced the F-35 through the sky, using cloud cover and the sun's position to confuse the pursuing fighters. One by one, she maneuvered them into compromising positions, forcing them to make mistakes. Phoenix, this is Wilson. I've patched into your backup systems. Transmitting targeting data now. Basic targeting information appeared on her remaining display. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. With lightning precision, Sofia engaged the 3rd hostile aircraft, her missiles finding their mark despite the technological disadvantages. The 4th went down after attempting to match her in a tight vertical climb that stalled its engines. But the final 2 pilots were more skilled, and her F-35 was beginning to show the strain of combat without its advanced systems. Warning lights indicated overheating engines and stressed airframe components. Phoenix, your aircraft is reaching structural limits. Recommend disengagement. Negative, command. 2 hostiles still approaching Qualine perimeter. Sofia knew she had 1 chance left. With her remaining missiles depleted, she would have to rely on the F-35's cannon, a close-range weapon that required getting dangerously near to her targets. Command, implementing final approach. If this doesn't work, she left the sentence unfinished. Everyone in the command center understood the implications. Sofia pushed the F-35 into a steep dive, accelerating directly toward the remaining hostiles. It was a head-on approach that no seeing pilot would attempt. A game of aerial chicken with lethal consequences. Phoenix, abort. Your approach angle is too steep. She ignored the warning, focusing entirely on the rapidly approaching aircraft. At the last possible moment, Sofia fired the cannon in a sustained burst while executing a roll that strained the F-35's airframe to its structural limits. Metal screamed in protest as G-forces mounted beyond design specifications. The maneuver caught the enemy pilots by surprise. One aircraft took direct hits to its cockpit and engines, spiraling toward the ocean in flames. The other pilot attempted to match her roll but miscalculated, clipping Sofia's wing in the process. Phoenix hit. Phoenix hit. Sofia fought for control as the F-35 shuddered violently, warning systems screaming about catastrophic damage. Aircraft began to spin, its damaged wing unable to generate sufficient lift. Command, I've lost primary control surfaces. Aircraft is not responding to inputs. Eject, Phoenix, eject now. But Sofia wasn't finished. Through sheer force of will and extraordinary piloting skill, she managed to partially stabilize the wounded fighter. The last hostile aircraft was limping away, damaged but still airborne, still a threat to Qualine. One more, she muttered, forcing the F-35 into a final pursuit trajectory. With her targeting systems destroyed and her aircraft barely responding, Sofia relied on instinct and visual tracking. She closed the distance to the fleeing hostile, ignoring the increasingly urgent ejection warnings. Phoenix, your engine temperature is critical. Structural failure imminent. With her last ounce of control, Sofia maneuvered the F-35 directly behind the enemy aircraft, and fired the remaining cannon rounds. The hostile fighter erupted in flames, its fuel tanks igniting in a spectacular mid-air explosion. Target neutralized. Sofia reported calmly, all hostile aircraft destroyed. Quiline is secure. Only then did she assess her own situation. The F-35 was fatally damaged, losing altitude rapidly with no possibility of recovery. The ocean approached with terrifying speed. Phoenix, status report. Aircraft unrecoverable, Sofia replied, her voice steady despite the circumstances. Attempting emergency water landing. It wasn't technically possible to land an F-35 on water. The aircraft wasn't designed for it, but Sofia had no other options. Ejection over open ocean, miles from any rescue assets, carried its own deadly risks. Drawing on every skill she had ever learned, Sofia nursed the dying fighter toward the water's surface, adjusting its descent angle to minimize impact forces. The F-35 fought her every inch of the way, its damaged systems making precise control. Nearly impossible. Impact in 10 seconds, she reported. If I don't make it, tell Wilson to finish the interface redesign. The flaw is in the atmospheric transition algorithm. You can tell him yourself when you get back, Wright responded, her voice tight with emotion. Sofia's world narrowed to a singular focus, keeping the aircraft's nose up as it approached. The water. The altimeter spun downward, 500 feet, 300 feet, 100 feet. Brace for impact. The F-35 slammed into the ocean surface with bone-jarring force. The cockpit went black as seawater surged over the canopy. Emergency systems activated automatically, inflating survival equipment as the fighter began its rapid descent toward the ocean floor. Sofia fought her way out of the sinking cockpit, her survival training taking over where conscious thought failed. The cold Pacific water shocked her system as she kicked toward the surface, lungs burning for air. Breaking the surface, she deployed her emergency flotation device and activated the rescue beacon on her flight suit. As the adrenaline began to fade, the pain of multiple injuries made itself known, likely broken ribs, a dislocated shoulder, and numerous contusions. "Command, this is Phoenix," she gasped into her emergency radio. "I'm in the water. Aircraft lost. Request extraction. Phoenix, rescue helicopters are inbound. ETA 12 minutes. Hold position." As Sofia floated in the vast Pacific, watching the last bubbles from her sunken F-35 disappear beneath the waves, a strange sense of peace settled over her. After 4 years of hiding her abilities, of pretending to be less than she was, she had finally returned to her true self. The secretary had become a pilot again. More than that, she had become a warrior. 12 minutes later, the rescue helicopter appeared on the horizon, its distinctive sound carrying across the water. As the rescue diver dropped into the ocean beside her, Sofia allowed herself a small smile. "Lieutenant Commander Chen?" The diver asked, securing the harness around her injured body. "That's me," she confirmed. "The one they used to call just a secretary." 3 days later, Sofia awoke in the base medical center to find her room filled with visitors. Wilson, Reynolds, and Zhang stood at attention beside her bed. Commander Wright sat nearby, reviewing documents. In the corner, Colonel Barrett conversed quietly with a man Sofia didn't immediately recognize. "She's awake," Wilson announced, noticing her open eyes. The conversation stopped as all attention turned to her. Sofia attempted to sit up, wincing as her injured ribs protested. "Easy there, Lieutenant Commander," Wright said, helping adjust her bed. 3 broken ribs, dislocated shoulder, minor concussion. "The doctor says you're lucky to be alive." "The hostile aircraft?" Sofia asked, her voice raspy. "All confirmed destroyed," Barrett replied. "Quiline reports no damage or casualties. You saved countless lives and created quite a public relations situation," added the unfamiliar man, stepping forward. "I'm Admiral Jackson, Pacific Fleet Command. Sofia tried to straighten, but the Admiral waved away the formality. At ease, Lieutenant Commander. I think you've earned a little informality after what you accomplished. Sir, I know I violated protocols by flying without proper authorization. Yes, you did, Jackson interrupted. You also executed the most extraordinary feat of combat piloting witnessed in decades. 6 enemy fighters, solo engagement, with a malfunctioning aircraft. Then you landed, if we can call it that, a fatally damaged F-35 on water and survived. He shook his head in apparent disbelief. The footage from your aircraft's external cameras has been viewed by every senior officer in the Pentagon. They're calling it the miracle over quinoline. Sofia processed this information slowly. The neural interface failure is being completely redesigned based on your recommendations, Wilson interjected. The atmospheric transition algorithm has been recoded. We're implementing all the changes you suggested during the flight. Your actions have also forced us to reevaluate some institutional assumptions, Admiral Jackson continued. Specifically, how we utilize personnel with specialized skills across all roles. He placed a small box on her bed tray. These were expedited by direct order from the Secretary of Defense. Sofia opened the box with trembling fingers to find the golden oak leaves of a commander. Effective immediately, you are promoted to commander, with all rights and responsibilities thereof, Jackson stated formally. Additionally, you are appointed as director of the newly established Integrated Personnel Development Program, with authority to implement your training methodologies across all service branches. Sofia stared at the insignia, then at the faces surrounding her bed. Wright was beaming with undisguised pride. Wilson, Reynolds, and Zhang stood taller, as if her accomplishment was somehow theirs as well. And in a way, she realized it was. There's more, Barrett added. Your water landing? It's being added to the emergency procedures manual. You created a survivable technique that no one thought possible. I just did what needed to be done, Sofia said quietly. That's precisely the point, Admiral Jackson replied. You did what was necessary regardless of your official role or designation. That's the lesson we're taking forward, that talent exists in unexpected places, and our job is to recognize and nurture it, not confine it to traditional categories. As her visitors filed out to let her rest, Wilson lingered behind. You know what they're calling you now? He asked with a slight smile. What? The Secretary of Defense. His eyes twinkled, both literally and figuratively. Sofia laughed, then winced as her ribs protested. I don't need a nickname. Maybe not, but you've become something more important to symbol. You've shown everyone that it's never too late to reclaim your true potential, that circumstances don't define your capabilities. After Wilson left, Sofia sat alone in the quiet hospital room, contemplating the oak leaves that represented not just a promotion, but a vindication. 4 years ago, she had been stripped of her rank and identity, forced to rebuild herself from nothing. Now she had reclaimed not just her former status, but something far more valuable, the opportunity to help others discover their own hidden potential. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Opening it, she found a simple text. From one secretary to another, thank you for your service. Secretary of Defense. Sofia smiled, tucking the phone away. Sometimes the most extraordinary journeys began with the most ordinary titles. Her journey from secretary to combat pilot was just one example of what was possible when people were given the chance to be more than their labels. As she drifted back to sleep, Sofia Chen, formerly just a secretary, now commander and program director, knew that her greatest accomplishment wasn't shooting down enemy aircraft or landing and program director F-35 on water. It was breaking down the barriers that kept talented people trapped in roles that didn't reflect their true capabilities. And that mission was just beginning. 1 year later, Commander Sofia Chen stood before a gathering that would have been unimaginable when she first arrived at Pacific Air Command. The transformed facility now housed state-of-the-art training simulators, engineering laboratories, and research spaces that hummed with activity from dawn until well past sunset. The Pacific Integrated Development Center had become a model studied by military strategists worldwide. But the most remarkable transformation wasn't in the buildings or equipment, it was in the people. Major Wilson adjusted his newly earned doctoral hood as he prepared to address the graduating class of 37 officers. As the center's first graduate to complete a full engineering program while maintaining operational duties, he had become a symbol of what was possible when opportunity met determination. 1 year ago, Wilson began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. I thought my ceiling was monitoring communications and filing reports. I never imagined standing here with a doctorate in aerospace engineering, speaking to people who will design the future of military aviation. In the audience, Sofia felt pride swelling as she watched her first student embrace his potential fully. Beside him on the platform sat Reynolds, now the center's head of neural interface systems, and Zhang, who had overcome his learning challenges to become a specialist in advanced diagnostic technologies. The graduation ceremony represented more than individual achievements. It marked the maturation of an idea that had seemed impossible when Sofia first proposed combining operational training with theoretical education at a remote Pacific base. Admiral Barrett, promoted after the Quiline incident and now the Pentagon's chief liaison for integrated personnel development, served as the keynote speaker. His presence symbolized how dramatically relationships could evolve when prejudice gave way to respect. When I first met Commander Chen, Barrett told the gathered officers and dignitaries, I made the mistake of judging her by her title rather than her capabilities. That mistake taught me something invaluable. The greatest threats to our national security aren't external enemies. They're internal assumptions that blind us to our own potential. He gestured toward the graduates who represented a diverse cross-section of backgrounds and specialties. Tactical officers sat beside intelligence analysts, pilots alongside systems, engineers, all having completed rigorous cross-training in fields outside their original expertise. These graduates prove that talent isn't distributed according to our preconceptions. It exists everywhere, waiting for someone brave enough to nurture it and patient enough to develop it. As Barrett concluded his remarks, Sofia reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The painful betrayal by Commander Kincaid now seemed like a necessary detour rather than a devastating defeat. Without that humiliation, she never would have discovered the satisfaction of building something new rather than simply advancing within an existing structure. Her phone buzzed with a message from Commander Lawrence. Congratulations on today's graduation. Offer to join Naval Aviation Development Program still stands. Your innovations are changing the service. Sofia deleted the message without responding, as she had done with similar offers from senior officers and government officials who suddenly wanted to associate themselves with the center's success. She had learned that some victories were too important to risk on the ambitions of others. Commander Chen? She turned to find Maria Wilson, the major's wife, holding their youngest daughter. Thomas wanted me to give you this. Maria handed her a framed photograph showing the center's first day of operation. Sofia barely recognized herself in the image, tentative, defensive, still carrying the wounds of her professional exile. Beside her stood Wilson, Reynolds, and Zhang, their faces mixing hope with skepticism as they embarked on an uncertain experiment. He says this is where everything changed, Maria continued. Not just for him, but for all of us. As the ceremony concluded and families gathered for celebration, Sofia found herself standing alone on the small platform, looking out over the crowd of graduates, families, and supporters. The scene reminded her of countless military ceremonies she had attended in her former life, but the energy was completely different. Those events had been about hierarchy and institutional advancement. This celebration was about collaboration and personal transformation. People weren't networking. For career advantage, they were sharing genuine joy in each other's success. Commander Chen? She turned to find Commander Wright approaching with a package wrapped in navy blue paper. The base personnel wanted me to give you this. Sofia unwrapped the package to reveal a wooden plaque bearing a small piece of salvaged metal recognizably from her downed F-35 and an inscription, "To Commander Sofia Chen, who taught us that the greatest strength is lifting others to find their wings." "The ceremony is nice," Sofia said, accepting the honor with genuine gratitude. "But the real reward is watching people discover what they're capable of." "Speaking of which," Wright replied, "I have some news. The Joint Chiefs have approved funding for 4 additional centers. They want to use our model across all service branches." Sofia felt the familiar mixture of pride and apprehension that accompanied every expansion opportunity. Growth was necessary for impact, but it also risked diluting the personal connections that made the center special. Who would run them? She asked. "Graduates from our program. Wilson has agreed to establish the first one at Pensacola. Reynolds is interested in the San Diego location. Jane wants to stay here and develop distance learning modules that can support all the centers." The beauty of the plan struck Sofia immediately. Rather than expanding through institutional mandate or bureaucratic directives, the program would grow organically through people who understood its mission from personal experience. As the celebration continued into the evening, Sofia found herself walking through the original command center where everything had begun. The space now served as a historical exhibit of sorts, preserving the consoles and workstations that had witnessed her transformation from exile to innovator. Her father's photograph sat on her old desk, his words as relevant now as they had been during her darkest moments. "Never let anyone define who you are. Talent speaks louder than words." She traced the frame gently, thinking about how those words had guided her through betrayal, humiliation, and ultimately redemption. But the redemption hadn't come through vindication or revenge. It had come through discovering that her greatest talent wasn't designing flight systems, but designing opportunities for others to discover their own potential. "Sofia?" She turned to find Wilson standing in the doorway, his doctoral regalia still draped over his arm. "Thank you," he said simply, "for seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself." "You did the work," Sofia replied. "I just provided the opportunity." "No," Wilson said, shaking his head. "You provided something more important than opportunity. You provided belief. You made me understand that my value wasn't determined by other people's expectations." As Wilson left to rejoin his celebration, Sofia remained in the quiet command center, surrounded by the equipment and memories that had reshaped her understanding of success, purpose, and fulfillment. 1 year ago, she had stood in the same spot as a secretary stripped of her identity, convinced that her career was over. Tonight, she stood as the founder of an educational movement that was transforming military culture across the services. The irony wasn't lost on her. In trying to disappear, she had discovered her true calling. In accepting what seemed like failure, she had found a success more meaningful than any military achievement. Her phone buzzed one final time with a message from an unknown number. "Commander Chen, I'm a junior enlisted technician at Norfolk whose daughter wants to be a pilot but doesn't think she has what it takes. I heard about your program on the news. Is there hope for someone like her?" Sofia smiled as she typed her response. "There's always hope. Talent exists everywhere. Sometimes it just needs the right environment to flourish. Let's talk about making her dreams possible." As she turned off the lights and locked the command center, Sofia reflected on the question that had haunted her since the day Colonel Barrett first challenged her competence. If you found yourself dismissed and underestimated, would you speak up immediately or let your actions do the talking? She had learned that the answer wasn't either or. Sometimes dignity required silence while you built strength. Sometimes justice demanded speaking truth to power. But always, always the most powerful response was creating opportunities for others to discover their own voices. The drive home took her past the runway where she had launched the F-35 on that fateful day. The same strip of concrete where she had nearly died bringing down 6 enemy fighters was now lined with training aircraft used by her students. The symmetry felt right somehow, a place of combat transformed into a place of learning. Tomorrow would bring new students, new challenges, and new opportunities to prove that potential existed everywhere if people were brave enough to nurture it. Sofia drove through the quiet streets of the base, finally understanding that home wasn't where you came from, it was where you chose to build something lasting. And what she had built at Pacific Command would last for generations, carried forward by people who had learned that their worth wasn't determined by their job titles, but by their willingness to lift others as they climbed. In the end, that lesson proved more valuable than any combat victory, more powerful than any military rank, and more lasting than any individual achievement. 6 months later, Sofia stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned training carrier Artemis, watching flight operations with a mixture of pride and wonder. The vessel represented the most ambitious expansion of her program, yet a floating campus where operational training and academic education happened simultaneously in the real-world environment of a deployed naval vessel. Impressive, isn't? Admiral Jackson said, joining her at the railing. From a single command center to this in 18 months. I don't think even you expected this level of success. Sofia nodded, watching a young pilot execute a perfect landing on the pitching deck. It's not about the equipment or the vessel, though. It's about the change in thinking. That's precisely why I asked you here today, Jackson replied. The Secretary of Defense is announcing a complete restructuring of personnel development across all branches based on your model. The Chen Doctrine, they're calling it, Sofia laughed. I don't need my name on a doctrine. Too late. It's already in the official documentation. Jackson handed her a tablet displaying a presidential memorandum. The concept is being expanded beyond the military. NASA, FEMA, even the State Department are implementing versions of your integrated development approach. Sofia scrolled through the document, amazed at how far her simple idea had traveled. What had begun as a desperate attempt to give Wilson and her other colleagues a chance at education had evolved into a national policy for talent development. There's something else, Jackson continued. Something more personal. He produced an envelope bearing the presidential seal. This came directly from the Oval Office. Sofia opened it with steady hands that belied her racing heart. Inside was a formal invitation to the White House and a handwritten note from the President. Your vision for developing talent wherever it exists has transformed our military and inspired our nation. We need your expertise on a larger stage. They want to nominate you as the next Secretary of the Navy, Jackson explained. The first female secretary, I might add. Sofia stared at the invitation, memories flooding back, the wrench dropping. In the simulator room, Colonel Barrett's dismissive sneer, Commander Lawrence's condescension, the overwhelming sense of being invisible despite her capabilities. From just a secretary to Secretary of the Navy, she murmured. That's quite a journey. It's a journey that thousands of others are now taking because of you, Jackson replied. Every day, someone who is overlooked or underestimated is discovering their potential through your programs. Sofia watched another aircraft land on the carrier deck, this one piloted by a young woman who had come through the Pensacola Center, a former administrative clerk who had revealed extraordinary aptitude for tactical aviation. I'll consider the nomination, she said finally. But my conditions remain the same as always. The program continues expanding regardless of my role. The focus stays on developing talent in unexpected places, not on institutional advancement. I expected nothing less, Jackson smiled. The President is aware of your priorities. That's precisely why you were chosen. Later that evening, Sofia found herself alone in her quarters, composing an email to the thousands of participants now enrolled in her programs across the globe. How could she explain that the secretary they had once dismissed might soon become their highest civilian leader? The words came slowly at first, then with gathering momentum. To my fellow travelers on this journey of discovery, many of you know my story, how I spent 4 years hiding my abilities, how circumstance and necessity finally forced me to reveal my true capabilities. What you may not know is that every day I am still becoming who I am meant to be, still discovering new depths to my own potential. And so are you. The invitation I received today to serve at the highest levels of leadership is not a vindication of my personal journey. It is a recognition of what we have built together, a new understanding that talent exists everywhere, in every rank, every role, every person who has ever been told you don't belong here, or this isn't for people like you. If I accept this position, it will not be to prove my critics wrong. It will be to prove my believers right, to show that when we invest in human potential, wherever we find it, the returns are immeasurable. Whether you are a former clerk discovering your gift for engineering, a mechanic revealing your talent for leadership, or an administrator unleashing your capacity for innovation, you are the living proof that titles do not define ability. Remember always, the path to excellence is rarely straight. Sometimes the greatest opportunities come disguised as setbacks. Sometimes our most valuable contributions emerge from our deepest disappointments. Whatever role I serve in next, my mission remains unchanged, to ensure that no one's potential is ever again limited by their job title, that no one's voice is ever silenced by their position in a hierarchy, that no one ever has to hide their talents to survive. Your journey is my journey. Your success is my success. And together, we are redefining what it means to serve with all of our gifts, without reservation or limitation. Onward and upward, Sofia. As she pressed send, Sofia felt a sense of completion unlike anything she had experienced before. The circle that had begun with her demotion to secretary was closing with her elevation to secretary, a symmetry too perfect to be coincidence, too meaningful to be ignored. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call. The display showed Wilson's name. "I just heard the news," he said when she answered. "Secretary of the Navy? That's incredible." "I haven't accepted yet," Sofia replied. "I'm still considering whether I can make more difference there or here." "You know what my vote is," Wilson said. "We need people at the top who remember what it's like at the bottom. People who see potential where others see only position." Sofia smiled, remembering the day Wilson had defended her against Commander Lawrence. "I wouldn't be considering this if I didn't know the program was in good hands with you and the others." "That's the point, isn't it?" Wilson replied. "You built something that doesn't depend on you anymore. It lives in all of us now." After ending the call, Sofia stepped onto the small balcony of her quarters, watching aircraft landing in the darkness, their lights tracing paths across the night sky. Each represented a pilot who had trusted her training, an engineer who had embraced her methods, a leader who had adopted her vision. The memory of that desperate day over Quailine returned the malfunctioning F-35, the impossible odds, the moment when she had to choose between who she had been told to be and who she truly was. She had chosen authenticity then, and it had saved lives. Now she faced a similar choice on a larger scale. The next morning, Sofia sent a brief message to the president accepting the nomination. The media coverage was immediate and overwhelming. From secretary to secretary, blared the headlines. "Hidden genius rises to cabinet," proclaimed the news alerts. But it was a small ceremony at the original Pacific Command Center that meant the most to her. The building had been officially renamed the Sofia Chen Center for Integrated Development, and hundreds of program graduates had returned for the dedication. I want to tell you a story, Sofia began, addressing the gathered crowd. Not about how I landed an F-35 during an enemy attack, though that's the version many of you have heard. I want to tell you about the real battle, the one that happens inside when the world tells you that you are less than you know yourself to be. The audience fell silent, officers and enlisted personnel alike hanging on her words. Each of us has faced that moment when we must decide, do I shrink to meet others' expectations, or do I expand to fulfill my own potential? Do I accept the limitations others place on me, or do I demonstrate the capabilities I know I possess? She looked out at the faces before her, Wilson and his family, Reynolds with his new flight wing insignia, Jan standing tall beside his father, Wright, beaming with pride at what her command had become. The true test of character isn't what you do when everyone believes in you. It's what you do when no one does, except yourself. It's continuing to cultivate your talents even when no one sees them. It's maintaining your integrity even when no one values it. It's believing in your worth even when the world dismisses it. Sofia gestured to the building behind her, now a thriving center of innovation and education. This center exists because people who were told they were just something, just a secretary, just a communications officer, just an administrator, refused to accept those limitations. They looked within themselves and found capabilities that transcended their titles. They looked at each other and saw potential where others saw only position. She paused, letting her gaze move across the assembly. As I prepare to take on new responsibilities, I leave you with this challenge. Never allow your rank to limit your contribution. Never permit your title to define your talent. And never, ever let someone else's perception become your reality. Sofia touched the commander's insignia on her uniform, soon to be replaced by civilian attire when she assumed her cabinet position. I was never just a secretary, just as you were never just whatever role you were assigned. We are all works in progress, constantly evolving, eternally becoming. Our potential is limited only by our willingness to recognize it in ourselves and nurture it in others. The applause that followed wasn't the polite acknowledgement of rank or position. It was the genuine recognition from one journeyer to another, from those who had walked the path of transformation and emerged stronger on the other side. Later, as Sofia prepared to board the aircraft that would take her to Washington for her confirmation hearings, she found Wilson waiting beside the plane. "I have something for you," he said, handing her a small package. Inside was a simple nameplate, the kind found on any government desk. It read, "Sofia Chen, Secretary." "To remind you," Wilson explained, "that sometimes our greatest strength comes from the titles that once seemed to limit us." Sofia embraced him, this man who had been the first to see beyond her administrative role to the pilot and engineer beneath. "The secretary will see you now," she said with a smile, tucking the nameplate into her bag. "Anytime, anywhere you need me." As the aircraft lifted into the clear Pacific sky, Sofia Chen, former secretary, future secretary, eternal innovator, watched the center grow smaller beneath her. But its impact continued to expand, rippling outward through thousands of lives, transforming the very culture of service and leadership. She had learned the most important lesson of all. True leadership isn't about the position you hold, but about the potential you unleash in yourself and in others. And that lesson, she knew, would continue to transform lives long after her own journey had ended. The woman they had once called just a secretary had become something far more significant, a symbol of the extraordinary potential that exists within ordinary titles, waiting only for the courage to be revealed. This story reminds us that sometimes our greatest setbacks lead to our most meaningful contributions. Sofia's journey from underestimated secretary to respected leader shows that true success isn't measured by titles or ranks, but by the lives we transform along the way. In a world that often judges by appearances and assumptions, The most powerful response is to build something that elevates everyone around us. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.